So as you all know, we're here to talk about redistricting. The governor made some news yesterday in which he backtracked from his original promise to veto a map that was drawn by politicians. Look, it is time that Governor Pritzker kept his promise and that he has made over and over again to the people of Illinois. And that promise is to support an independent map process for redistricting. As a candidate, J.B. Pritzker told voters repeatedly through multiple on-record comments and written statements that he would support an independent commission, not incumbent politicians, to draw Illinois' legislative boundaries. For example, on March 5th, 2018, Rich Miller asked him, quote, "Will you pledge as governor to veto any state legislative redistricting map proposal that is in any way drafted or created by legislators, political party leaders, and/or their staffs or allies?" His response was, quote, "Yes, I will pledge to veto. We should amend the Constitution to create an independent commission to draw legislative maps, but in the meantime, I would urge Democrats and Republicans to agree to an independent commission to handle creating a new legislative map." Now, as the governor, he has the ability to lead and the authority to act, but unfortunately right now he is simply running away into the darkness of partisan politics. Yesterday, when asked about redistricting, the governor hilariously said that Republicans were just saying no and not really engaging. Interestingly enough, we have had 16 Senate committees and have sent him 3 letters requesting him to appear before one of them of his choice, either virtually or in person. And he has so far refused to attend any of these hearings or send anyone from his administration. He is the one who simply is not engaging, which is why we're here today. This is not just a Republican talking point. Public polls have shown that more than 75% of Illinois voters support an independent process that puts citizens in control of drawing election districts instead of politicians. As a politician, I understand that 75% support for anything is an overwhelming majority of the public. We think that the majority deserves to hear testimony from the governor's office on a topic that is going to affect our elections for the next decade. And if he is going to continue to refuse to testify, the people of Illinois deserve to know why he is breaking his promise. Despite what the opposition falsely claims, Illinois does not have a June 30 deadline to draw maps. The deadline in the Constitution is October 5th. There is plenty of time for the governor to make good on his campaign promise and insist on an independent redistricting commission. So, Governor, will you insist on independent redistricting committee yet this year? And with that, we'll turn it over to Senator Barackman.
Good morning, everyone. Jason Barackman. I represent the 53rd Senate District out of Bloomington. I'm here to call on the governor to keep the promise that he made to voters when he was campaigning for office. Leader McConkey referenced the governor's statement in response to a question from Rich Miller. The governor's response says everything that the public needs to know here. The governor said, quote, "I pledge to veto." He didn't just make a promise, he made a pledge. And to the 600,000 Illinoisans who signed petitions asking for an independent commission, to the millions of voters who believe that Illinois should no longer have legislators drawing their own districts and picking their own voters, the reality is this: if the governor abandons his promise, he will have lied to you. Now, there's no reason for the governor to break his promise. The country's trend is clearly moving towards independent commissions. This issue has clear bipartisan support, not only around the country, but in Illinois. Our own former President Barack Obama has championed the cause for independence in the redistricting process. And the reality with the governor is this: Governor Pritzker has a trust issue with voters. Voters no longer trust that this governor can solve the problems facing our state. I think that was abundantly made clear in this last election when Joe Biden overwhelmingly won the Illinois vote, and Governor Pritzker's tax increase proposal was overwhelmingly rejected by voters. The point here is there's no reason for the governor to flip-flop on this very important issue to Illinois voters. Voters are that not only do they not trust the governor, they just don't trust government. And the governor has an opportunity here to change that narrative. Now, importantly, this book isn't over, and there's an opportunity for the governor to uphold the promise that he's made to voters. I've introduced Senate Bill 1325, which creates an independent commission. Importantly, the independent commission that we propose to create is identical to that which was proposed by my colleague, Senator Julie Morrison, in 2019. Her constitutional amendment then, SJR CA4, is identical in language to that which we propose in Senate Bill 1325. Senator Morrison's resolution garnered 37 co-sponsors in the Senate, 18 of which were Democrats, and most of which remain in the Senate, serve in the Senate today. Similar independent commissions have been given lip service by countless Democrats in this state, including those sponsored by Speaker of the House Chris Welch in a measure that passed the Illinois House back in 2016 with 105 yes votes. The way it works, it works within the parameters of the Constitution today. It doesn't propose to change the Constitution, but it works within parameters that exist today in the Constitution and allows Illinoisans to pick their politicians instead of the current process, which empowers politicians to pick their voters. We give the Supreme Court, rather than Democrat or Republican leaders, the power to appoint 16 independent citizen commissioners to the Independent Redistricting Commission within 30 days of becoming law. Our commission requires that the gender, racial, and geographic diversity of the state is incorporated in the commission, and we look to preserve the Voting Rights Acts to ensure that racial and language minorities are fully represented in the electoral process, not by giving it lip service, but by requiring it by law. Notably, the governor and countless Democrats have said that this is an important provision. That's why we put it in the legislation that, again, is identical to that which was supported by Democrats previously. So, party affiliation on the commission is evenly split, in addition to including members who have no party affiliation. Importantly, legislators, state employees, and lobbyists are prohibited from serving on the commission. The point of all of this is there is a solution that exists today for which we can enact today and solve the problem of lawmakers and legislators drawing their own districts and picking their own voters. The opportunity is now. I think this is a historic opportunity for our state. This process only comes about once every 10 years, and what's most critical at this junction is that Governor Pritzker is the one person who can make this happen in the state. He's no longer a candidate for office, rather he's the governor, and his voice matters in this process. Notably, other than yesterday when he seems to have done a 180 on his promise to voters, the governor has been silent as to whether he'll uphold the promise that he made to veto any legislation, any maps drawn by politicians. He has an opportunity to uphold his promise, and importantly, he's the person that can make this happen. So with that, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Senator Bryant.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's good to be here with you. As Leader McConkey and Senator Barackman said, and I've already explained to you, the voters said to this state, to the leadership here in overwhelming numbers, that they prefer an independent map, meaning take the politicians out of the process. Illinois Democrats are once again gearing up to subvert the will of the people, and they want to do it for their own political gain. So this is the same song and dance that those of us in the minority have kind of come to expect from the majority party. Governor Pritzker said that he was going to be different. And so, when we get to a place where he said he was going to change the process, and he promised independent maps for the people of Illinois, and yet he continues to enable politicians, and I use the word enable politicians, who've run Springfield for decades, to continue status quo, and who basically refuse to give up their own power. So when pressed for an answer, he tries to shift the blame, and shifting it to the Constitution or to the legislature, or as he said yesterday, tries to shift the blame to the Republicans, which I think, as Senator Barackman said, is somewhat hilarious, and I don't mean hilarious ha-ha. It's hilarious not in an especially good way. So in this process, remember that many good government groups have been pushing for an independent commission, and they've been doing that for decades. Also remember that over 600,000 citizens signed petitions asking for an independent commission, and they did that both in 2015 and in 2016. And then the fact is that the truth is that the people of Illinois are not dumb. They pay attention to what's going on here in Springfield, and while I guess, as they're paying attention, the governor might forget that his promise and think that they are not paying attention. The people of Illinois they're done with accepting empty promises from politicians as the status quo, and they proved that overwhelmingly by voting against the governor's progressive income tax. In addition to that, I think they're done with accepting that those who are in charge of the state government somehow always have time for their own personal agendas, but say that they don't have time for things that are truly important, such as an independent map. But they seem to have time for everything else. Despite the overwhelming objections from the voters in Illinois, the Democrats are moving forward with drawing a partisan map. This is obviously to let the incumbent politicians pick their own voters, and to preserve their own power. The power that we're talking about is not just those who get elected, but it also allows them to raise your taxes, spend your money, close your schools, and form laws again, under their own power. So I would say to Governor Pritzker, or to you about Governor Pritzker today, he can hide behind non-answers and excuses. He can blame Donald Trump. He can blame COVID. He can blame equity. But the people of Illinois are smarter than he gives them credit for. So today our question is this: is the governor going to ensure that we have a map that's drawn by an independent commission for the next 10 years, or is he going to back down on his word, like all the other politicians that he criticized during the campaign, and let his Democrat cronies draw the map and keep themselves in power? So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Leader McConkey.
Leaders.
So just to close, what I want to say is the gerrymandering train is on the tracks, and it is moving ahead. And Governor Pritzker has considerable power as the chief executive to make his candidate promise a reality. If the governor abandons that promise, he abandons the best chance that we have to actually have change the nature of our politics for not only the next 10 years, but for generations to come. And with that, we'll have the others up here and we'll take questions.
Can you or Senator Barackman delineate the proposal that you have for an independent commission, how it doesn't, and maybe I'm asking you to confirm a negative or deny a negative, but how it does comply with the Constitution, that the Constitution doesn't require the process that we're going through now?
Sure, and I think, thanks for the question. I think Rich Miller covered this last night, this morning. This is a proposal to create a commission by law. The legislature does this every year. We could do this by joint resolution. The Constitution lays out the process for redistricting, and it provides some guidelines. The legislature has a chance to pass their own partisan map by June 30th. The Constitution, the drafters of it, contemplated what happened if that didn't occur and create this, the Redistricting Commission that has its own process that concludes on October 5th. What we purport is to create an independent commission that generally sits on top of that, where the independent commissioners, they could convene right now, they could have public hearings, but they would be mandated by law to produce their own map upon receipt of the federal census data. Once they produce their independent map, they would hand it back over to that constitutionally created redistricting commission, who would then put it in law by October 5th. It doesn't purport to change any constitutional process as a part of it.
You're following the guideline because
Correct.
there's a commission in the Constitution, there's a commission in your bill.
Our bill requires the independent commission to hand its independent map to the constitutionally created commission. It doesn't change that process. It requires us to give it to them.
Does the constitutionally created commission be required to accept that map?
The leaders, you want to talk to you?
Yeah, so we have, committed that the only people that we would appoint to that commission would be people who would publicly state that the only map that they would accept would be the one given to them by the independent commission.
That commission has legislators on it though, correct, or partisan people?
Yeah, so it's half legislators, half other
No.
people, non-legislators.
Let's go to Dave next, if we can.
Thanks a lot. I've got a couple of questions. The numbers aren't good. I mean, the Democrats have a supermajority in each chamber, as you know, U.S. House. How prepared are Illinois Republicans to stand up a candidate who not only would be better than the Democrats, but who could also win the election?
Are you referring to a specific?
Well,
Kind of
one would be
race?
governor, and then some more would be, the legislature and the U.S. House. I mean, a naive person would say all you have to do is get a better candidate and, get them to win. How prepared are the Republicans to do something like that?
But the point right now is not to get into the political season. What we're talking about is promises made by the current governor when he was last a candidate for office. This is the promise that he made to voters. And again, it's more than a promise, it's a pledge. And he made it and said, look, if you vote for me, this isn't about the next election, this is about the last one. His words, you vote for me, I pledge I'm going to do this for you. Not for politicians, but for you, the public. It's his own words that all we're asking for today be upheld, that he keeps his word. I don't think that's impossible to ask for, especially at this historic moment. This only occurs once every 10 years, and the governor's not a candidate. Again, this isn't about politics. He's someone who has the ability to get this done, more than any other person in the state. If the governor would step forward and lead on an issue which has huge bipartisan support, and an issue for which he says he has said he is for, he could get this done. It's probably the single greatest good government reform that any state could enact, let alone our state that is filled with a history of gerrymandering and corruption. It's an opportunity to deliver a big win to voters who are asking for their government to represent them over all the other special interests that are out there.
Maybe with the love and support I can muster, I think that's a little disingenuous because you guys do want to increase your numbers. And I'm guessing you want a map that'll help do that.
We want to, Dave, we want a map that is fair, where the people get to choose. That may mean that I'm in a more competitive district than I am now. May mean that they're in more competitive districts. And we're fine with that, because what that would do is put the people back in charge, which is ultimately what we want.
Well, a fair map, let's say, how close would you be to 50-50 for taking the majority if the map were, in your words, fair?
No, what we propose, Dave, it's not about us. It's about voters. Our legislation would mandate a list of priorities that must be fulfilled in any map that is drawn. Notably different, there's nothing in there that says we need to draw districts that are to the advantage of any political party. Rather, we by law say a number of things. It's in our bill, 9 priorities, including compliance with the United States Constitution, the Voting Rights Act, districts be substantially equal in population, they provide protections for racial minorities, language minorities, be contiguous, compact, and on. You can read the remainder in the bill. That is a reflection of our desired priorities in any maps that are drawn.
We're gonna go Andrew sometimes next, and then we'll go to Mark.
Yeah, thank you. I've heard Republicans say in the past, you just said that the June 30th deadline isn't the real deadline. And should your bill not pass and we go to that other process mandated by the Constitution, I've heard other Republicans say that that's an independent commission. Would you consider that, even though that's partisan people?
It's a bipartisan commission. I think that's even the words that are used in the Constitution.
Yeah. And really, is this just a process to try and run out the time on the clock to get to that bipartisan commission where the Republicans would have more power?
No. I mean, again, this is us trying to do in the only way that we're currently allowed to do what the people overwhelmingly say that they want. Over 75% of people say that they want this. And the fact that this is something that on a bipartisan basis, a substantially similar proposal passed with 105 votes in 2016 in the House. We had a supermajority of co-sponsors for this exact language 2 years ago in the Senate. All we're saying is we want what the people want.
Awesome, let's go to Mark.
Why do you assume that voters would elect more Republicans under the new map?
We aren't assuming that at all. We've not made that statement. Others have made that statement.
Senator Ryan,
Is there-
respond.
Yeah, I mean, clearly, the goal here is to have a map that is fair. You can look at many of the maps from the last draw, and Senator Barackman just said, we're constitutionally required that they be contiguous and compact. I would use my own district as an example of the House district that I previously represented, that it looks like an hourglass that runs about 150 miles long. What's compact about that? So clearly what we're looking for maybe the first time in Illinois in decades, is a map that it truly meets the constitutional requirements here, and again, to be representative of the entire state. Sorry.
Mark, do you have a follow-up?
I did, forgot it.
Okay, let's
Sorry,
go to Mike.
sorry,
and then
Mark.
John.
Should anybody be drawing a map without complete census data? And could your commission start after the block by block or whatever else is needed, to have complete data and finish by October?
So the census has indicated that the census data will be available in mid-August. That is probably 7 weeks' time between then and the October 5th deadline in which they would be able to draw a map. So not only does this proposal do exactly what the voters have said that they've wanted, and as bipartisan support here in the legislature historically, but it actually allows us to use the real census data that will be available in mid-August.
Let's do Mark, then Mike, then online.
Hold on, let me just, one other to that. I think we saw yesterday how important it is for the state to use the real data, right? There was lots of discussion about the estimates that were put out by the ACS data, and yesterday was the census actual appropriation data. Those two were in direct conflict. And the governor spoke to this over the years. He spent $31 million roughly in state money encouraging the public to work with census workers and fill out their forms. For what reason? So that they could be counted in their government. That's the governor's own advocacy encouraging people to do that. So why today would the Democrats threaten to use data that is invalid? Clearly, it's to serve some political purpose. It's not to make sure that people are counted in their government. And again, what our proposal allows for is the use of that actual census data when it arrives, shortly, in a few weeks.
Look, you mentioned the commission must be comprised of citizens, no legislators, no lobbyists, and no state employees. But we've seen members of the Central Committee appointed to sit on a commission like this before. I mean, who are these apolitical angels that are going to draw a map without any politics in mind?
Well, there's a couple of components embedded in this to make sure there's independence. First of all, these are not political appointees. These are appointments made by the Illinois Supreme Court. They're the ones who are going to make the decisions of who's appointed. And more importantly, not more importantly, but also the composition of the commission is not just a proposal that we came up with this year. The composition is identical to that which was supported under the Senator Morrison initiative, co-sponsored by 18 Senate Democrats, and supported also by by numerous good government groups. They're the ones who really helped craft the independent proposal that we today have introduced as legislation.
So just to follow up, Don Tracy and Robin Kelly could sit on this commission.
Well, no, the requirements are in the legislation. So I can't speak to any one person. I can speak to the requirements, and then we'd have to, there would be an analysis done specifically by the court when they're making their appointments.
Okay, we're gonna go Mike and then Sarah, and then we've gotta take some online questions, okay?
Thank you. Timing is everything here. You already mentioned that the gerrymandering train is on the tracks. Your proposal can't move unless it gets Democratic support. The last time we talked, there was none. So what's happening here, and is there even a chance that it would get a vote, even get out of committee?
Well, this is exactly why we're asking for the governor to take leadership, right? I mean, I firmly believe that if the governor was to weigh in, it was to say, look, I'm going to fulfill my promise. I am not going to sign a map that is drawn by politicians, that the legislature then would have to look at other options, right? Right now, they're looking at an option which includes him signing a bill. And if he would actually honor his promise to say that he would veto that map, then what we're looking at is looking for other options, and this is exactly the option that can get us where the people want us to be.
So do you
Sarah.
think
Plenty of
yesterday he misspoke when he said what he said? Or do you think that's actually his idea?
That he misspoke when he made his pledge?
No, yesterday, when he went that kind of specific.
It didn't appear so to me. I don't think, I mean, what he needs to do is stand up and say, you know what, I made the people a promise, I'm going to fulfill that promise. That's what he needs to say.
Sarah?
How can you be sure that what you're proposing is going to be found constitutional?
There's no question of its constitutionality. I think even, if you've looked at the statements put out by others, there just is no question of its constitutionality. There's, again, the plain language of the legislation does not purport to make any changes to the Constitution or the process that is in place there.
Is it something that has to be done through a constitutional amendment, or is it something that the legislature can do?
Our proposal is legislation. It proposes to pass a law, like we do all the time, and there's plenty of time to do just that. It wouldn't even require legislation. The House and Senate could pass by resolution the creation of an independent commission, charged with the same things here, composed of the same types of people, and tasked with delivering an independent map.
You're using the language that came from legislation that created a constitutional amendment, so why would this?
Yeah, so Senator Morrison proposed to amend the Constitution, create an independent commission, and her process. The only difference between her proposal and ours is that we don't propose to amend the Constitution. We simply propose to, by law, to create the commission that's contemplated here. The structure of it is the same.
And you don't think there's a constitutional problem?
No, because what we,
Creating a new commission to sit on top of and supersede the one that's created.
it doesn't supersede. The bipartisan commission can take the map that they are going to approve from any source. I mean, in the three of the last four times that we've done redistricting, 3 times it went to this bipartisan commission and ultimately to a pull of the hat. The Constitution is silent on what source they're going to get that map from. and all we're saying is we're going to create that source, and any appointees that I or Jim Durkin have to that process, they're going to have public commitments that the only map that they would embrace is the one that comes out of the independent commission.
Ellie has some questions from online that we're gonna go to, and any follow-ups on like details of that, we can get you all afterwards too.
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and go to Patrick, from Zoom. Sorry, Patrick, there you go.
Morning, Leader. What is your legal strategy at this point, considering that, as you mentioned, the train is on the tracks, and it appears Democrats will be able to draw their own map? Is it ACS data that you challenge? Is it mapping that you challenge? The Democrats appear very confident in case law on whether they can use ACS data to draw the map.
So what I can tell you.
Legal strategy.
Yeah, so what I can tell you is that the witnesses from good government groups, ethnic groups, have all indicated, well, I shouldn't say all, many of them have indicated a expectation to file suit based on the use of ACS data and their belief that that is insufficient to be able to especially take care of minority rights with the Voting Rights Act.
You know, Patrick, I would add into that as well. Remember that I'm not sure if it's at every redistricting meeting, but certainly the Southern redistricting meeting, even the League of Women Voters has weighed in that they do not want to use the ACS data. So when we're talking about what women think about the process as described by the majority Democrat Party in all of this, even the League of Women Voters does not agree with using the ACS data.
Ellie, do you have any more over there?
That's it.
All right, we can go, we have time for just a couple off topics. Does anybody wants to ask anything else, or?
How do you approach leaders meeting? I think you have one with the governor later today, is that right? What do you hope to achieve?
This is going to be the first leaders meeting that we've had since I've been in. I expect it'll be more of a kind of a get to know you. I assume we're going to be talking about energy legislation, which the governor is introducing, is revealing at noon, as far as his kind of agreement, his idea or compromise on how to address the energy issues in the state. I think, you know, there's other issues I hope to, I assume it'll be a broad-ranging discussion, but we've not been informed of any detail.
What are your non-negotiables in a utility or energy piece of legislation?
So I don't have anything that I'm ready to reveal at this point.
Terry, do you have coal interests? Are you know, what's your standing on coal?
Sure. So I've been pretty clear. You know, we're sitting on roughly a minimum of 50 years, some say as much as 100 years of coal, with 50% of our energy still produced by coal. So when you take someone who's coming from really the coal central for Illinois, and I say, hey, I'm all about an all-inclusive, you know, wind, solar, water, natural gas, whatever it happens to be, but all conversations moving forward have to also include coal, because we're not prepared at this time to move away from coal. We can begin the process of starting these new methods or newer methods, and that's great. I'm happy for that. But the conversation for deep southern Illinois, of course, and probably central Illinois, always has to include coal as a part of the conversation.
And any reaction to the court's ruling yesterday on the Floyd card and its constitutionality?
Sure, I'm happy about the court's ruling. As you know, I am one of the individuals who believes that the FOID card is unconstitutional. However, I know since our last interview, we talked a little bit about fingerprinting. So the bill that Director Kelly is actually supporting includes fingerprinting as a means going forward, but not mandated. So I hope that the courts that the courts continue to uphold the fact that FOID is unconstitutional and totally wipe out the FOID card. But if that doesn't happen, then of course we have some alternatives to that as this continues to work through the court system.
What do we hear about a Governor Barrickman?
I haven't heard that rumor, Dave.
You better pay attention.
Yeah, really. Otherwise, you're going to go get in there and you won't even know it. Yes, really.
Let's just hope whoever's there next keeps their word.
There are,
Well, I was just gonna follow up on the Floyd issue and the bill you mentioned, Senator Taylor's bill, backed by, the ISP director, and in the House at least, a lot of the provisions of that bill have been, brought into the larger, Fix the Floyd Act, which does include, mandated fingerprinting. And so, if that bill comes over to the Senate, what's your strategy for trying to make sure it doesn't pass?
Is that question for me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I will do the same thing that I did in the House, because I was kind of tasked with negotiating with Representative Willis in the House on the bill. Mandated fingerprinting for representatives like myself, for senators like myself, is a non-starter. So if mandated fingerprinting is included, I don't know how the sponsors of that particular bill get enough votes for it. There are some areas for compromise. Again, I have a district that I represent, and I personally don't want the FOID card at all. But as long as it's there, and until the court rules completely that the FOID card has to go away, there's some room for some compromise. And so I prefer Senator Taylor's bill and think that there's probably enough votes there for it. And it does, as a mom, a wife, a grandma, I can tell you I can speak, now serving for 7 years, I have a good feel for what the women in this state want in regard to that. And it's not that much different between a suburban mom and a downstate mom. We want safety for our children. We want safety for our communities. So there is a little bit of wiggle, a little bit of negotiation room on the topic.